right, it is Tuesday, May 28th, 4:01. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. I'll do a roll call of planning commission members first. Howard Tritz,
Here.
Joey Edwards,
Here.
Steve Stevens,
Here.
Dave Clark Barrel.
He just got on, I think.
I think we just saw you join.
Yeah.
Hi, there you are. We see you. And Jason Rubel. Okay,
Here.
oh, great, thanks. Oh, there we go. And then we have County Commissioner Fiedler.
He's right outside the door.
Okay. Commissioner Munch
Here?
and Commissioner Edwards.
He's back.
Any changes or additions to the agenda?
No changes or additions to the agenda.
Okay, we have minutes to approve from May 13th. I could not get mine to open. It was my own error, so I did not read them, but if you guys read them and have a motion to, okay.
I can move to.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Great. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Great, so we update staff.
Great, so we are in the process of doing, several completeness reviews right now. Some of the files that are a little bit larger files, we have Timber Ranch. It's a PUD major subdivision with 87 proposed sites, and a mix of townhomes and single-family detached off County Road 4. And they are talking about putting some deed-restricted units into the mix. We're going through our first commercial recreation permits for recreational use on county roads. We are looking at a completeness review for Sugarloaf Mountain Ranch for a resort, CUP. And we're also working on the Tim Birch site plan review for backcountry structure. That will be our third backcountry structure since we approved backcountry zoning. So that's, we've got several others. Can you think of any other substantial applications that we have?
Domino's, that one's
Domino's
June
site
10th.
plan, so June 10th, we have Domino's, and we have the backcountry site plan for you both scheduled for June 10th. Then we are talking to several other conditional use permits. We are looking at Gateway preliminary coming up in 1041 review. So those are also be some that are upcoming in the near future and certainly during this development season. So, but we've got a lot of pre-apps going on and additional inquiries and asks for other projects as well. So those are just some that I can think that are already in development, pre-app situation or in completeness review. We also have Titan Gold that has submitted a gravel mining CUP. So that's another one as well that we have in completeness review right now. So just to kind of give you an update of what this season and the rest of the year is going to look like for you.
Yeah. Not boring.
No.
Alright. Okay, we'll move down to new business. We have file 24-08, the Silver King Planned Unit Development and Site Plan Review. No, oh no, I gotta do, sorry.
Your script.
Thank you. Okay, the Lake County Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners will now conduct a joint public hearing. This statement I'm reading shall be incorporated into and made a part of the record on these proceedings. The Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners have jurisdiction to conduct a joint public hearing on a planned unit development without subdivision. This type of application is processed consistent with the rezoning under section 3.13 of the Lake County Land Development Code. Concurrently, the Planning Commission is addressing the site plan review requirement for all commercial uses seeking construction permits. The purpose of this hearing is to consider whether the proposed amendment should be approved. In considering that matter, the commission will address the approval criteria set forth in sections 3.13.3, 3.11.3H, and 3.15.3E of the Lake County Land Development Code. The procedure to be followed in this hearing will be: 1, members of the commission and or board will disclose if they've had any ex parte communications. 2, the applicant may then make their presentation. 3, the county staff will respond with any outstanding items or concerns. 4, after that, any other persons either supporting or opposing the application may present evidence. 5, supporting and opposing witnesses may be questioned by the commission and the board. Once questioning is concluded, no further questioning is permitted unless granted by chair. 6, the applicant may then present any rebuttal evidence. The parties and witnesses are asked to not submit redundant, irrelevant, or cumulative evidence. If someone has already made the point that you wish to make, please simply say so. The chair will also require that all comments be made to the planning commission and the board, and that there be no dialogue between the applicant and members of the audience. At the conclusion of the evidentiary portion of the hearing, the chair will entertain a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing, and the commission will discuss and weigh the evidence. Then there will be a motion to close the discussion phase of the joint public hearing. The Board of County Commissioners will then leave the meeting, and the chair of the Planning Commission will entertain a motion on the application. The motion may take form of one of the following recommendations. 1, approve the application with no conditions. 2, approve the application with the recommended conditions. Or 3, deny the application. The planning director shall make record of any substantial discussion on the motion and include that in the record with the recommendation of the commission. The commission's recommendation will be in the form of a statement of motion. Are there any objections to the jurisdiction of the commission or to the form or substance of these proceedings? Hearing none, I will now ask each planning commission member and then each county commissioner if you've had any ex parte communications to disclose, and if so, to please disclose them now. Howard Tritz.
None.
Joey Edwards.
None.
Steve Stevens.
None.
Dave Clark Barrow.
None.
Jason Marufo.
None.
Okay. Commissioner Fiedler.
None.
Commissioner Munch.
None.
Okay. Staff may present.
Very good, thank you so much. I'll just, I can just click through there. So staff is gonna present just basically, what the process was, the changes that, during this continuation, the applicant has brought forth, and just remind, the planning commission and the board of the approval criteria. So these are just some supplemental information. Most all of everything that staff has today has been in the 3 iterations of the staff report. And so the current zoning of this project is business, and the allowed density under business zoning is 8.7 dwelling units per acre. This project with 56 units on a little over an acre and a half would be approximately 37 dwelling units per acre under this new PUD. We are processing this under the code provision for PUD without subdivision, and it's processed as a rezone application. And we've asked the applicant to make rezone findings accordingly, and we've also considered preliminary PUD findings as they apply to a redevelopment project. Rezone findings, first we're looking for consistencies with the comp plan. And some of the pros that aren't listed up here, but the applicant brought forward were the affordable and workforce housing goals listed in the comp plan, and live-work units close to where people work. So that was one of the pros. Unfortunately, there is also an inconsistency, or there is an inconsistency in the comp plan, and that is the future land use map, which designates this area as highway commercial. Code then says if there are inconsistencies, was there one, either a mistake in the original zoning, an applicant or staff are contending there wasn't any mistake in the original zoning, but has there been a change in conditions, and does the rezone bear a reasonable relationship to the welfare of the community? And so just looking at, here is the future land use map, which designates this area as highway commercial. And then the change that the applicant speaks about in their application is the annexation that happened in 2017 of the Leadville, the rail yard at Leadville annexation, which was all of the area here in purple. Subject property is right here. And under that development plan, here shows the new imagery. You can kind of see some of the construction that has occurred in phase one. Phase one of the rail yard PUD is approved and currently under construction. And that zoning looks like highway frontage is high density commercial and residential type of uses, hotels, multi-story mixed use. That's typically what you'll see in this kind of front portion of the rail yard. And then it starts transitioning to a mid and then lower residential density. So as you go east, you go into kind of a mid-density residential townhome use, and then eventually into a lower single-family detached density. And at the far east, there is a tract of land that was dedicated to the city for future expansion and connectivity to the Mineral Belt Trail. Phase two is still in concept, but it is proposed to be similar to phase one. It's pending approval, but it would still look at that highway frontage, higher density commercial mixed use, and then potentially with some residential use as well. And then phase three, so phase three, the most adjacent part is the property that is currently owned by Fading West. And their concept is more of a mixed residential use with single family homes up to multifamily apartments. This concept really hasn't discussed any type of commercial use. So the city did provide feedback in a referral letter suggesting that this higher density residential use was compatible to what the change in the PUD zoning and annexation that has happened within this area in the northern corridor. The Silver King, let's see if I can move that to. These are the changes that we had asked for in the series of reviews that we've done and the applicant has made within the zoning control. There is no longer an expiration on the workforce housing occupancy requirement. As you require, there was a 6 to 16 year time frame that no longer expires. The workforce housing occupancy requirements stay intact. And the occupancy requirements in subsequent years 6 and on, that 50-50 kind of split, is the 50% is a minimum, not a maximum. So if the workforce demand is present, preference will always be given under the current zoning as proposed for workforce first. So if the demand is present, workforce could occupy 100% of the units versus the 50-50 split. The 50-50 would only be if vacancies were realized and workforce preferences were not available in order to occupy those units. Climax has made a 10% set-aside dedication to Lake County to be able to use for essential workers. And for, it is under our understanding that we have a considerable wait list of workforce that is needing units that we could immediately use for those 6 units. They rounded up to 6 total units. And then the zoning now considers more participation with the Regional Housing Authority in leasing, and also the ability, of course, to enact an audit if they would like to go in at some point and just make sure that leasing practices and occupancy requirements were being properly maintained. The length of lease has been lengthened as well from now a 3-month versus a 1-month lease. And this is to mitigate that concern about displacing an essential worker. through a workforce lease. And then these are the suggested conditions. I will mention that number 1 is also number 4 in your suggested motion that I gave you, because I guess I just wanted to emphasize that one a bit. We haven't talked about it, so it's in there twice when you're looking at your conditions for approval. One thing that we didn't talk about as we were kind of looking at the site is the ability for an integrated pedestrian and bicycle trail system as the adjacent properties develop. We've talked at length with the applicant about the benefit of such a connectivity. And so this condition would obligate the property to participate in the creation and integration of pedestrian and bicycle trail system. All 3 phases of the rail yard PUD are in consideration of this, and there is an opportunity just directly to the south of the parcel boundary for participation in that connectivity that could connect the Mineral Belt Trail, the Fremont Trail, Fremont Pass Trail eventually, and then also access to the city services and core. The second condition is a final plat or ALTA survey that would be reviewed and approved by CPD, and it would be recorded with the PUD control doc. So the ALTA is not quite done yet. We talk about the survey details that are known at this point in the site plan review, but when that is finally done, it would be we would record that as the final plat for the PUD. Number 3 is the site shall provide the adequate number of required ADA spaces, and I think actually now as I reread the narrative this afternoon, I do think the 3rd space I was looking for is there. But when I first read it, I think I only saw 2. And then the site shall remain dark sky compliant. It is a series of surface mounted exterior lighting and then the pole lights. We have done site visits at night to ensure that there wasn't overly any kind of excessive light pollution as far as scatter, and that the exterior lighting provides safety without being overly illuminating other areas other than safe entry. Number 5 is consideration shall be given to providing a recycling drop-off for tenants. On the site plan, you will see that they have dumpsters and enclosures for those, but keeping with our recycling goals, we're suggesting that they consider that as another amenity that would be beneficial for the tenants and for the community. And then 6th, as always, all representations made by the applicant in the application and in hearing shall be conditions of considered as conditions of approval. And I think that is everything that staff has, and so I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and stop sharing. And then go to the applicant.
Anything immediate for Ann, or move to the applicant first? Okay. Go ahead.
We put a presentation together, but
Yeah.
Ann is also,
And we've also caught a lot of the stuff that we had presented previously, as we didn't want to be redundant and save everyone some time. And this slide is basically Ann's presentation.
but we really appreciate everyone being here again. I know we had to make a meeting today, so appreciate you all being here. I think as the top 3, as we've highlighted, we've continually iterated on the feedback to incorporate that into our zoning control document. And then just highlighting 4 and 5, which Ann highlighted as well, that, we recognize the need for long-term housing solution and have extended it beyond, with no end date on that workforce housing, so there's no drop off there. And then the need for longer-term lease protections, with a minimum 90-day lease for tenants, that meet 1, 2, 3, and 4 qualifications, and actually in addition, the 180-day lease for folks that don't meet that to avoid any kind of other short-term rentals. We didn't put some of the other pieces in there, they're included in the zoning control document that Ann highlighted, but
There's a crowded page already, so.
but highlighting the other pieces that Ann brought up as well with the in her presentation, and then we wanted to leave the comments for Climax to speak about as well, if that's okay.
I think the next slide was just kind of highlighting on the updated zoning control document qualifications. That, again, Anne already went through, so just highlighting this for everyone. I don't think we need to talk about it, and then I think Aaron from Climax here, we had incorporated 2 slides that he had. If you want to just go to the next slide, Cece, sorry. Actually,
You can keep going.
yeah, keep going.
Oh, more.
There we go.
So.
We had talked at length with Climax about their, excitement about this project and, bringing workforce housing. I think they wanted to talk a little bit about what their housing needs have been. I think there's been a lot of talk about it, and I think Climax just wanted to set the record with what they're planning on doing with this and what their future plans are.
Hi, my name's Aaron Hilshorst. I'm the Land and Water Resources Manager for Climax, and just wanted to give you guys a short kind of history of how we got where we are. So as many of you know, we purchased the American National Bank building in June of 2022 with the intent of providing temporary housing for new hires. One thing we found is that people coming up here to work at the mine were struggling to find housing. We might get them for a week or two and then they leave. So being able to give them some temporary housing, providing them up to 120 days, 4 months, should give them the opportunity to establish themselves here and stay on as both community members and employees. So we have 15 residential units in the building, one mix of 1 bedroom and studios. If this Silver King proposal is approved, then we are going to transition the bank building from temporary or transitional housing to full-time housing for employees. We opened in August, we purchased it in June, opened in August for employees to move in. I think we only had 1 unit at the time. And since then, as we've transitioned former tenants out and employees in, it's been routinely fully utilized, with the exception of vacancies in between tenants being turned over and kind of the usual cleaning and replacing of items. But it's enabled 21 employees that have moved in there and have moved out, found housing either in Lake County, Chaffey County, or in the area, but they've been able to stay on as Climax employees, which has been incredibly helpful in just trying to retain our workforce.
Next slide.
Thank you.
So the reason for that, as of April 30th last year, we had 408 employees, which is short of what we need to fully operate the mine. So we desperately need more employees. We have a high attrition rate based on a lack of affordable housing and just housing in general being a reason why many people leave the site. So based on the success we've had with the bank building and that finding housing retains our employees, concluded that securing housing for more employees is going to be critical to reaching our headcount for full operation. And so the Silver King is providing the 55 units, is key to establishing that long-term housing solution and allowing people to sign year-long leases and work at the mine. Understanding that we have an opportunity to assist the county and help out with housing needs in general. We have decided to guarantee 10% of the units or 6 units for local workforce housing. And we will consider also subleasing additional units to the county if we don't have the desire or there's just not enough employees that are willing to live at the Silver King. So we understand that it's having housing available but not using it isn't helping anybody, so we want to make sure that we can make that available to others.
Awesome, thanks, that's super helpful.
And that's it, so thank you guys all. I know we've come here a few times and we appreciate all the feedback everyone's gotten. I think we've had a lot of great conversations and hopefully looking forward to working with everyone in the future on this.
Okay, before we go to public comment, do commissioners or planning commission have any questions for the applicant or for Ian at this time?
Just to clarify and I'm still a little confused at like who to ask this question to, like Blue Hour or Climax. So the 3-month lease term that was mentioned in the narrative, I think, is that for Climax? Will Climax manage the leases then on each unit, Aaron?
Yeah, and so yeah, Climax is not intending to utilize anything shorter than a 1-year lease. But we also understand that if people are moving in and have the opportunity to find housing before they get to that 1 year, we don't want them to feel pinned in, so we will allow them to break their lease essentially and open that up for a new employee or, local workforce if we don't have employees really.
Okay,
But the 3-month is in the zoning control document that will abide by that.
So if Climax
Isn't there
backs out tomorrow, it's what's in the zoning controls, the 3 month.
And then it's 6 months for anyone outside of qualifications. So it's just ensuring that it's not it doesn't.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then the 6 units, what was on that slide was a little different than what I understood reading it. The 10% dedicated, and is that to like county government, or is that just opening it up, Aaron, for other applicants to come in a different pool of people?
That's a good question.
Yeah, our intent is to work with the housing authority and Climax to kind of identify individuals that need the housing, and then, they have the ability to use those 6, but they will
But it's not
not
for
be being used for
people,
Climax.
Climax people, it's.
Okay,
And so, yeah, I think that there's still, Climax needs a little bit of clarification on that as well, as whether it would be a lease to the Regional Housing Authority or Lake County, or, cause it doesn't, I don't think Climax wants to be in the realm of leasing to locals necessarily.
managing like that.
Being a property manager for that.
Yeah,
And that's where Blue Hour is helpful, we're the property manager, so we can help facilitate all of that.
And we will have a property manager and individual living there on site as well. As you see, there's 56 units, we speak of 55 rooms, so there'll be someone who's dedicated on site full-time to help
To do that.
manage kind of anything on site that comes up, as well as kind of the any other requests kind of along this.
And they can handle the leases
Yeah.
for those individuals, yeah.
okay. And I appreciate kind of both sides of like the longer leasing and the bank building idea and transition, but also can appreciate that like incentive to not necessarily, both for employer needs and I guess maybe the facility and just like operating needs. It's not necessarily that people will be living there for 10, 15 years in all likelihood, right?
Okay. We were trying to create the original.
The same people in the same unit, I guess.
The original 1 month was to enable kind of the month lease if somebody wanted to kind of be there while they were looking. It's our intent that someone would live there as long as possible. That is always, I think, someone who owns a property, their intent is somebody
They have
stays
kids,
as long
they
as
decide to-
possible. There's not turnover in units. So the intent was to create flexibility for individuals rather than try to create any type of loophole. So we've amended it as requested to kind of ensure that that's not the case, and hope that comes through in the zoning control document and the comments that Climax has made as well.
Okay. Alright, thanks.
Heather,
Yeah,
Heather,
Howard,
I
go
have
ahead.
one question.
Sure.
What is Climax's definition of essential employees as opposed to non-essential?
I don't know if we're necessarily qualifying that, we're using language that others have used to identify local workforce, so I don't think, we may, I don't know what our role is going to be necessarily involved with that selection, but, I think there are certain requirements that we would like to see. I just don't know how that's going to roll out or who would be involved with that.
I think the idea was that it was meant for, the nurses, teachers, police officers, firefighters, people of that, nature.
But yeah, we were, I guess, hesitant to find who is essential and not essential to a community. I think that there's
That was part of the conversation with the Regional Housing Authority of,
to define what
to
is.
define that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, what if we just amended that language? Well, first of all, and here's where it keeps getting very complicated. What Climax is doing is not necessarily part of what we're doing here. What we're doing here is deciding on the PUD zoning control document, and then we understand that there's this intent that Climax is going to rent some of these units, but technically, we have to think about it in the way of, they could leave tomorrow and it could be somebody else in their position. So we wanna make sure the PUD zoning control document has the pieces that we're looking for, but understanding and giving Climax some feedback because they're the likely tenant is great. But I just wanna make sure that we're like keeping the two separate, which it's becoming really not separate, so, yeah. It sounds to me like the intent of Climax is to work with the local housing authority on renting available units to Lake County. And that's as far as we are involved in that conversation. And hopefully the housing authority works out who's essential.
And the zoning control document in years 1 through 5, say 75%, 25%, 75 workforce, 25%. Again, minimum standards that if for some reason a master lease wasn't in place and that changed, negotiations fell through, Blue Hour would still be looking to master lease and looking at filling at least 75%. If demand's
Either
there.
themselves or master leasing.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's part of the need to have flexibility is obviously if we guaranteed that we had Climax for eternity, you know, we'd be having a different conversation, but the property needs to be flexible for if that doesn't work and we have to find others, there needs to be some.
That is for the first 5 years, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have not done a ton of research on your other properties and other locations, and I'm wondering, you know, having been concerned about taking away that commercial lodging option, but it could catalyze other investment in other areas. I'm curious, in your experience with other properties, have you ever converted those back to commercial lodging? I mean, this is one of 3 larger lodging opportunities in this community, and I think it's a little bit different than others with, you know, maybe dozens of lodging opportunities, so I'm curious if that's.
We had put in the original zoning control document the opportunity to convert it back to hotel. I think that was removed from the document because I don't think that that's a conditional, I think it's conditional use now is that being allowed, so certainly in the future, if they would have to go back for approval to be converted back to a hotel. I think our view is that currently as it's being operated, it's the best use at the time is not for a hotel based on our understanding and kind of our diligence on the property. I think our view is also the Rail Yard 3 as a proposed hotel, or is it Rail Yard 2 or Rail Yard 3 has a proposed hotel going in, which will more than compensate for these the number of units here that are being taken and used for housing. But you know, I think it's a conditional opportunity right now in the future, if that's something that somebody would look to do in the future.
And the changes we're making here are really just enhancements to the current property that would make it still operational as a hotel. So in terms of it would be another process like this, but in terms of the need to convert that back from a investment perspective, actually all the changes we're making would be, I think everyone would highly value that as a hotel if it need be.
So they would have to go make the argument that it benefits the welfare at that point, you'd be turned back to a hotel, based on our understanding.
Yeah,
I'll
the
let
zoning
Ann
would have to
highlight it.
change, yeah.
So in their PUD zoning control, they do, hotel is conditional, so it would be a conditional use permit if for a redevelopment plan.
I had a question on one of the slides back here, I'm just, one of the applicant's slides. one back. Sorry, I am getting confused. Feedback 3. What is, how does this map on that feedback 3 row relate, or these two?
So it's very similar, so the only difference between feedback 3 and feedback 4 is that feedback 3, you made the change to, in total 50%, but the allocation stopped after year 15. So in
Oh,
year
I got it,
16,
okay.
it could be 100% market here and
So we went up last time to 50%
Yeah.
when we presented, and this time we're now extending that for the life of the property.
yeah, perpetuity.
Okay,
That was, yeah.
Yeah.
Just
okay, I was just getting confused between those two and then.
Sorry.
And then the 10 notes, I should read more carefully. Okay.
Steve, you have a question?
Well, just on the intent of Climax in years 6 through 16. These allocations look as if you're kind of backing out of it a little bit. And I don't know if your intent is to, if you're an ongoing consideration or concern, if you're still gonna continue to wanna maximize your usage of the facility.
So we have a 5-year lease where it's got an option for another, renew for another 5 years, but, you know, we, depending on, you know, how it works out for us, maybe we do that, or, you know, maybe it does revert back to Blue Hour and then they proceed with the current allocations, or proposed allocations.
There's also the potential opportunity that
Another
they,
employer or
or
someone
that
in the
they
area.
could decide we'd like to lease half of it after year 5, you know, there's no
Yeah,
obligation to go
Right.
beyond and then be half to, you know, so there's kind of some flexibility there, so the reason it goes down is partially because there's no guarantee after
Right.
year 5, so.
And preference would be given to.
That's correct.
And those percentages as minimums. Okay.
So,
Yeah, can we get the Zoom back up?
And can you guys hear me? It's
Oh,
Ruth.
hi, yep,
So- Hi, I was at the meeting last week. My name's Ruth Bourne. I'm one of the deputy county attorneys now, and you know, one of the things that I always try to figure out is presuming we come up, you get approved and we can come up with an agreement that makes sense out of these standards that you're putting forth. My question is, what are your thoughts if it doesn't work out? I mean, I have thoughts, but I really want to hear, you know, what your thinking is in the event that it doesn't get occupied or we can't satisfy these requirements. And, you know, what's the reserve thinking?
Can you maybe clarify a bit more by saying if it doesn't work out, how you would define that, I guess, is that in
Well,
your-
so you have, sorry, so you have established, oh, a certain amount of housing will be, you know, designated for Lake County residents and some will be master leased, and what happens after 15 years? So if that doesn't occur, what is your thinking? Like, what kind of flexibility could we build into an approval that would work for everybody? I guess is a more specific way to ask the question.
Yeah, I guess in terms of how, if it's not working out, if we're not hitting those, is the question if we're not able to achieve those 75% thresholds and 50% thresholds? I think part
Yes.
of that was built into the document, that was the mechanism of if we're not being able to occupy these, going to, there was a mechanism there about going in there, being able to lease to other people outside the county and talking to the Lake Housing, Regional Housing Authority about saying, hey, we went out to the market, people, no one in the Lake County wants to rent these units, no one in the surrounding counties, can we alleviate, can we lease to others that are outside the community that are looking to house there?
It's really kind of a waterfall, you always start with Lake County, and if no one's renting them, then it expands to the surrounding counties, and then if no one's renting that, it expands farther. I think our view and hope is that we would never even really go that far, because it sounds like there is a demand within the county, and so I guess does that answer your question as far as if it doesn't work out, how we would move forward?
Yes, you know, because the way I think is, oh, how do you craft the agreement? So,
Yeah, no,
you know, and to be
That-
perfectly frank, I'm so sorry, there's background noise. Yes.
no, definitely, and we've built that mechanism into the zoning control document to ensure that, you know, rents are being offered at the, you know, average rent that's being offered to folks in Lake County to make sure that prices aren't either going up, but, you know, being
Or
rented for way
issue.
higher to price
Yeah.
people out, or way lower where the property doesn't operate affordably and then it has to shut down. So we've kind of created a mechanism there that we think is fair and achieves the desired incentives for everyone. And will ensure this property stays full for the long term.
I wanna
Yeah, go
on
ahead.
that question though, it also seems like that, commercial lodging conditionally approved, we're going back, could be a good opportunity for a separate. There's one building that's separated from the majority of the building, right? I mean, in these circumstances that,
Yeah, there's possibilities, yeah.
We've certainly, yes, looked at, you know, what would, even in our construction now, what would we potentially be able to do to kind of think of those as, you know, if you ever did operate them in, let's say Climax only took one of the buildings a day or another, that you could make it a very clean separation of the two, just to provide it flexibility in the future for whatever those needs may be. And I think our discussions with Ann so far have just been like, let's address this in the future when we understand what the needs are, because I think if we looked 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, there's certainly always a need for housing, but it would look different every 5 years. So so keeping that flexibility open, our hope is that we would move towards using it for whatever the highest kind of welfare maximization is.
Any other questions from planning commission or county commissioners before we go to public comment? Okay, do we have any public either in the room or on Zoom who wishes to speak? Go ahead, Pete.
Peter Day, Lake County. Just this discussion caused me to think a little bit about what the county housing authority or county obligations would be for these 6 units. You know, right now, there's a need for this housing. Would the county, whether they were occupied or the authority, whether they were occupied or not, have to pay a monthly cost to Climax or whoever the operator is? Or would those just be set asides that, if they're used, then there's a lease for them. If they're not used, then they just sit there. I mean, in other words, is the county gonna be obligated to pay if it's not being used now or in the future?
Well, the county is not,
Or the housing authority?
oh, I see.
Somebody, in other words, is there gonna be a cost burden to the county or the housing authority if the units aren't leased for county workforce housing?
So the way I understand, and I think we can involve the applicant in that response as well, but if they aren't able to rent them, if Climax does not have somebody or that 6% that's allocated towards the housing authority, it would be, if the housing authority doesn't have anybody, then I think it's when they set aside, either does Climax have anybody, I think it goes down the line to whoever is available. And that piece, again, that 6%, that's a Climax thing, that's not a PUD control thing, so that's gonna be up to them. If we don't have anybody to fill those, they're offering them, they're not available, then Climax has those units.
And one other question, are there any not to exceed lease terms for either the housing authority controlled units, well, specifically for those? In other words, could the housing authority decide that they wanna do 5-year leases on those units, and would that be okay?
I think we're open to those types of leases, I think it's just again part of the,
Well, and again, the conversation on the housing authority piece is the conversation between Climax and the housing authority. So that has nothing to do with these guys, if that makes sense, so.
Oh, it does. It's
It'll just
part of
be,
the-
yeah, it'll just be that it'll be whatever gets negotiated with Climax and the housing authority and who wants to go in there. And yeah, we have somebody that wants to go in there for 3 years, okay, great. I will say that's not super common, but it can happen for sure. That'd be
Thank you.
probably awesome, but.
And I guess just one other thing that I would add on that, it also allows the county the opportunity, if they would desire to subsidize, those units as well. So if there was a potential that the housing authority was having difficulty in finding the right applicant, there is always, there's flexibility in a lot of different directions. If that ever became something, if it was like a housing stabilization or, whatever, those units have a great deal of flexibility.
I'm sorry, I
Go
would
ahead.
love more clarification now then on what, is it to, well, Lake County and the housing authority do not currently have capacity to manage like rental units really, but we could. So I'm wondering like, is Blue Hour, what is that relationship? Is it really just with Climax or is it with Climax saying those units can go to 6 folks that the housing authority connect them with, and then who is managing that, Blue Hour? Or Climax?
Probably. But I think this is getting really in the weeds. So what we're doing here is we're talking about management agreements that aren't part of the PUD agreement. So that part still has to happen, but we're saying right now, as at least on their slide, be at least these many people. And then we heard from Climax what their intent is. But we can't bind anybody to that intent right now. We can't bind anybody to that 6% because that's not what we're voting for here. We can understand that Climax has this intent to give 6% units back to the county, but we're not binding them to that in this moment because they haven't even signed a management agreement with these guys to rent the full units. Does that make sense? So we don't have any, so the only control we have here is over the PUD control document. And hoping that that document is clear and specific enough that the intent of Climax or whoever isn't Climax and comes in and does it is operating in a way that we approve. So I think the idea of bringing Climax in here today was good, but it confuses everything a little bit because they could go away tomorrow and not sign this. And it could be that these guys have to rent every single unit on their own, but per the PUD control document. And then 6% doesn't matter because it's not Climax anymore. So the management agreements between Climax and, that 6%, that's all gonna have to, that's like, we intend to do this, we don't know how yet, but we're gonna intend to do this. I think that's just letting us all know that Climax doesn't intend to let them sit empty, that they're willing to give Lake County some of those units back. And so I think it's just this like goodwill intention piece, but it really isn't something that we can enforce after the fact because this tonight and what we approve, or you approve, is the PUD approval, which won't have anything to do with that. So those pieces, I think that if the county wants to know how that looks, we'll want to make sure they're just part of those conversations with the housing authority, like, we don't wanna manage them, we don't wanna do this. Therefore, Blue Hour, do you wanna step in and manage, and I think all of those negotiations on how management agreements work are gonna be the like operations of the business. So as long as you feel like the PUD control piece is meeting those, if everybody feels comfortable with that, then we forget about the 6%, because the 6% is this like pretty hopeful thing that might happen, but if it doesn't, are we okay with the other percentages and allocations that the applicant has presented as part of the PUD?
Just to clarify, it's 10% to 6
10%,
units, am I right?
6 units, 10%.
Sorry,
Only because we're,
10%, sorry, yeah.
only because we're recording. I just wanted to make
Okay,
sure.
thank you, yeah.
And then in
6
years 1 through 5, it's 75% workforce. So Blue Hour is saying regardless of whomever is master leasing, in year 1 through 5, it would be 75% workforce as a minimum,
And then eventually lower to 50%.
as a minimum.
Yeah.
As a preference.
Yeah.
But having a preference for 100% at all times in both, in the project as a whole.
Yeah, and it's tough, cause I think like that's what gets tough is, and I do wanna make sure everybody feels comfortable and aware of that situation, because like I said, most likely scenario is Climax rents it, does this 10% kickback, all of this stuff works out really pretty, but if it doesn't, we don't want anybody leaving this meeting feeling like they aren't operating it the way they're supposed to, as long as you're meeting your PUD control, so I just wanna make sure everybody kinda knows how that works. So if we are all fine with, well, if this approves based on the PUD document, if Climax does something better, that's great, but beyond that, we have to be okay with the
That's
document.
right, if Climax does nothing, we still have the guardrails in place
Correct.
in the PUD agreement.
Yeah, this is the minimum, and then if whoever master leases it, or however they manage the situation turns out better than this, again, like Ann was saying, they're minimums, not maximums.
But their preferences.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to emphasize here, it's not a guarantee, it's a preference.
Well, the 75% is.
No, the 75%
So it's
is
a
a
And the
guarantee.
50%.
25% on top of that is a preference for Lake County.
That's what I meant, I'm talking about the 25%,
Yeah, sorry.
50%
Yeah.
some treaters. Cause I'm kind of on the same side as Ruth is, what if this doesn't go right?
Mhm.
What are your guard bands when it doesn't go right? That's what I get concerned about.
That's the mechanism for, we go to the housing authority saying, hey, we can't fill this with all the Lake County employees, can we start renting it out to other people that aren't Lake County employees?
Correct.
And that's in our PUD control document, which is part of this
And if
process that
that
we can
doesn't
talk about.
happen, it goes to open, the Lake County Housing Authority has no say in it.
We can't
That's
leave,
my concern.
we can't leave the units open.
No, I understand, I just said that's the concern for me, the same one Ruth had, is that if you can't fill it with everybody from either Summit, Chafee, here, and you've got open units, you're gonna wanna fill them, you want 100% occupancy, that's your job. And you don't have any constraints on the, what I would call opens. And I don't know what the intent is, if it's, at that time, we convert with a conditional use approval for, commercial, or hotel portion of that, or how that works.
Well, and I guess I just think about it on the side of, if they can't rent them to Lake County, Summit County, Chaffey County, they can't rent them at all, and they need to rent them.
Right,
So they're gonna have to come up with a new business plan and bring that back
That's,
to us.
yeah.
okay.
I mean,
Well,
that's the,
So are we, is that true? Do they have to come to us? Because right now, the way I'm reading this is it's open, and open is under their control, not ours.
If
what
they-
is open?
If they wanna go to a different, business plan, so if they wanna think about hotel use or a different type
But that's
of use,
conditional
it's
use
conditional.
permit.
Then they have
Hotel
to come in
uses,
for a review.
hotel uses, but the other options for open.
For long-term rental, if for long-term rental, open market, although if, in looking at what our housing needs assessment have been in the past and what our current update is for our housing needs assessment, and what we've heard from our, Jackie Bealhan, and I see she's on here, our director of the Regional Housing Authority, our need is great.
Okay.
And so I think there is a certain reliance that our community need for workforce, that at least where we are in this space and time,
Sure.
the need is there, but absolutely, subsequently, if that need diminishes, then this would be a long-term rental project.
Okay.
And one more question, just to clarify, so the 6 units, you can't fill one of the units, it leases long-term. The next available unit becomes available, then becomes one of those 6 potentially, if one of those is leased outside. So it's a rolling area, it's not a 6 designated units.
It's a real, yeah, what
That's correct.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And just again, if it was gonna be outside of the county, they have a more stringent setup, be at least a 6-month lease.
Okay.
180 days versus the preference, so there, not only is there a preference baked into our document when we look at applications and what those people have to, but if you live in Lake County, you have the preference saying, I can sign a 3-month lease and I don't have to sign a 6-month lease. They can obviously say, oh, some longer leases are better for us, it's better for them, but if they also get that, just that general benefit of being from Lake County. So we are baking in other real preferences for,
We have deep belief there's a lot of need for housing in this community.
It's incentive for Lake County then to do that because they've got more flexibility.
yeah.
I would be shocked if it wasn't fully filled in many different scenarios.
We'd have to go back and look at it right through.
As we would all hope.
Any other questions, staff or applicant?
I'm wondering, since we have the opportunity and regarding signage, can we set a condition for changing signage on the property? I think Silver King's signage is tiny, but it's way up there. So I don't know if that's something to add to kind of the lighting
There,
component, or will you be changing signage? What does that look like? I think we would encourage you to not have something monstrous up there.
Do you tend to change signage?
We do intend to change the signage on the property if that's, something.
Would it be changing the format of the signage or just the sign itself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're planning on taking down.
Taking down the large sign that sticks up into the air and put a more, maybe a better sign, a
grounded
ground
sign,
level,
yeah.
More of a
Yes.
And we have sign
multi-unit
permit,
complex type
right?
of signage, yeah.
Yes, we have a sign moratorium right now, and so their zoning control document says that they will be consistent with the land development code. So land development code, right now, we have a moratorium on signs we just put into place last week. And so you'll be subject to whatever the new sign code is, and that's what their zoning control document says, is they'll be consistent with the land development code. So when you take that sign down, you'll have to wait until there's new regulations.
We're happy to have a sign removal ceremony.
We've never heard it.
Yeah, people can take it.
Okay, one last, any other questions or comments? Before we close public hearing? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close public hearing.
Edwards moves to close the public portion of the hearing.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, public hearing is closed. Commissioners may enjoy the rest of their evening. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you staff and applicant for working together. I think this is a nicely revised application, in my opinion, and I think, just knowing the ins and outs of the housing market, I don't think you'll have a problem renting the units, unless for some reason they're priced out of proportion, so it seems like you'll get that all figured out for your own best interest. Anybody have any comments or wanna start, or somebody wanna make a motion?
The only thing that I wanna point out is that to streamline this application, we have done kind of a group of applications into one. So we do have 2 suggested motions for the rezone PUD, both for conditional approval or a denial version. And then later in the staff report, in just for planning commission, is the deciding body for the site plan. And so we haven't talked too much about the site plan, but there are approvals, a suggested motion for a conditional approval of the site plan as well, and a denial version. So if there's additionally any questions of staff regarding the site plan, I see Morgan is here as well. And we are still waiting on that final Alta survey, which will be,
I should have that in two to 3 days by the end of this week, I'm hoping. They were able to go out this week because of the snow is gone.
We found the man this morning.
yeah, right? And so I didn't know if you wanted to hear from Morgan or the applicant, just, I know one of their slides was the site plan, and so it is covered in the staff report, but if you would like to have the applicant go over their site plan,
You
for
covered that
redevelopment.
pretty well earlier.
Yeah.
The bicycle trail, I'm assuming, is behind the property.
So
Where does
do I
that
have
run
a,
potentially
can
through the
you
property?
show on my, it should be on my slide.
I'm assuming it's not just another sidewalk along the highway, so.
No, no, no. So how about that one? So this, sorry.
Should do that.
Oh, I'm probably right in front of Zoom too. Even that one would be okay too. So maybe first let me show and then I'll maybe go to the development one. But right here would be that piece and right here is already, the Mineral Belt Trail goes
Sure.
around the PUD here. They already dedicated a track right here, through the rail yard. The connectivity piece would be here and then depending, but it might be a straight connection along this eastern boundary to the mineral belt, but it would be the connectivity piece here or here.
Gotcha, okay. Just
That's what
an
we,
access
that's what we believe, right? That, I mean, still, it will be dependent upon what those future phases of the rail yard end up looking like. But that's a, kind of a great place to look for some,
Zoom, do you need to see where that is? So it's, I don't know,
the mouse maybe.
yeah, if you can use the mouse to show that. So the connectivity would be,
To the south of the, okay, to right here, just to the south, where there's that little strip of property that is part of phase 3 of the rail yard. And then what I was showing is that on this furthest east point of phase 1 of the rail yard PUD, there's a tract of land that has been dedicated to the city, which has direct connection to the Mineral Belt Trail here on 12th. And so being able to connect this parcel with phase 3 and phase 2 and then into phase 1, this is potentially, I think, one of the connection points. There's also eventually getting to Mountain View Drive and then the bike lane around on 17th as well. So there could be some additional connection right here or over here. But they would access somewhere either on the eastern or southern portion
So you guys
adjacent.
have pledged to provide access, assuming the rest of that gets built.
That's
And
correct.
if you look at the site plan, there's many proposed bike racks and other things outside
Yes.
on
I'm sure.
the,
And it's a benefit to
I think it'd be great for the community, so I mean,
And I think I would just highlight from a site plan perspective, and maybe the one update was that, there were some additional parking spots added through some, moving through property lines.
Sure.
Additional parking spots, all that additional communal area space outside, which we think really is a huge benefit. And will provide an even better site plan than what we proposed the first time, so props to Morgan and Bunny for working out how to incorporate that.
There you
can
go.
see here, there were more parking spots, so like some of these were incorporated out on this side of the property, and then moving this to more of a community space in the back. Here, parking on this side, so just more additional spaces, so more visitor parking, and potential for some of the units to be allocated 2 parking spots if needed as well, so.
How many potential parking spots do you have as opposed to 56 units? How many potential parking spaces do you have now?
75.
Okay.
So we're really excited about that and have been able, to incorporate that in and would also highlight that in the summer months, there may be even additional parking, but which that may be June, July and August, but without
maybe
the snow.
July and August.
Yeah. But yeah, really excited about that.
And again, this is the PUD suggests, recommends around 25% open space. But again, this is a redevelopment reuse project. So Morgan could probably tell me exactly what the percentage of this is. I think it's probably 15-18%, something like that. But again, that's a recommendation, but there is this nice communal. And on top of this, in talking with Morgan, his team, and the applicant, they were able to, there's also gym space, communal co-work space. There's storage indoor storage. There is all of the bike racks. Where there, yeah, right there.
With the communal laundry.
And so there is some nice gathering space in the main building as well. Which again, if Morgan, if you have anything, it's your plan, you might wanna share.
Yeah, I can chime in on that. Yeah, I think you guys basically covered the main points, but through the preliminary survey research we've gotten, it's everything shifted closer to the highway to the west, which gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of the parking along the west while maintaining that buffer from the highway. And then, yeah, the parking on the back on the east was really inefficient in terms of how many spaces we were getting for that area. So you can kind of see the pavements underneath that property line along the east edge. And so it's technically what we think, we're almost sure that we're going to get back in this final survey. The Alta is that, some of that paved area is actually not on the property, which gives us the ability to devote that for the back area. I think it was something like 18% as kind of communal open space. So we can really kind of maximize like bike parking and just, the nicer kind of pedestrian experience back there where it's also a little bit more private and quiet from the side. And yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, just to clarify what Morgan was saying, this is all paved right here outside of the current shown documented survey line and has been used by the Silver King for 20+ years, has been always shown as paved. So, our hope that would also be a potential addition to the property, additional space, additional, cause it runs this whole entire length of the property, so, we think it's great as is, but we also do think there's even some more opportunity to kind of add some space on the property as well.
All right.
So there are two motions for you, one for
Yep.
the site plan and one for the PUD.
So we have the rezone PUD first. Does anybody want to make a motion? Somebody's so excited to do that?
Any last minute thoughts?
I don't have any.
Okay. Edwards moves the planning commission recommend conditional approval of the Board of County Commissioners of file 24-08, a rezoning from B business to PUD planned unit development, according to the Silver King PUD zoning control document to be recorded for the approximately 1.5 acre site, the 2020 North Poplar Highway 24, legally described as the southwest 1/4 of section 13, T9S R80W, with the following conditions. Number 1, the Silver King PUD shall participate in the future planning and creation of an integrated pedestrian and bicycle trail system as adjacent property development occurs. Number 2, a final plat Alta survey as reviewed and approved by the Lake County Community Planning and Development Department be recorded along with the PUD zoning control document. Number 3, the site shall provide an adequate number of required ADA parking places. Number 4, the site shall remain dark sky compliant. Number 5, consideration should be given in providing a recycling drop-off for tenants. And number 6, all representations made by the applicant in this application and in this hearing should be considered as conditions of approval. And further find, under the Land Development Code, section 3.13.3 and section 3.11.4 H1 through 8, the proposed rezoning is found by the Planning Commission or Board of County Commissioners respectively to be inconsistent with or not in compliance with all parts of the Lake County Comprehensive Plan. However, the proposed rezoning bears a reasonable relationship to the welfare of the community, and there's been a change in the conditions of the neighborhood that supports the requested rezoning. And further finding as condition, an approved criteria of the Land Development Code, section 3.11.4 H 1 through 8, PUD preliminary approval criteria have been adequately met.
Thanks, Joey. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
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 Great.
Aye.
Okay. Now, does somebody wanna make a motion for the site plan review?
You wanna borrow my computer, Steve?
I guess so.
I've got it right
So I
here.
can't read them, yes.
You got it?
I've got a written one for you if you want. It's just number 4 is redundant, so
Oh, is it?
I,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
I took it out for
Just
you.
let me show you next week.
So I move the planning commission conditionally approve file 2408 Silver King Bud site plan review with the following conditions. Is this the site plan, right?
Yeah.
Silver King Bud shall participate in the future planning, creation and integrated pedestrian and bicycle trail system as adjacent property development occurs. A final plat, condition 2, a final plat, Alta survey as reviewed and approved by the Lake County Community Planning and Development Department be recorded along with the PUD zoning control document. Number 3, the site shall provide the adequate number of required ADA parking spaces. Number 5, the site shall remain dark sky compliant. 6, consideration shall be given to providing a recycling drop-off for tenants. 7, all representations made by the applicant in his application and in the hearing shall be considered as conditions of approval. And further find that section 3.15.3E approval criteria have been met as evidenced in the staff report dated 4/28/24.
Agreed, seconds.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Okay, our recommendation goes on to the commissioners and they'll hear it at their next
Regular meeting,
Good luck,
Is that on
June
the
4th,
June 4th.
so that's next Tuesday.
Alright, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Edwards moves to adjourn. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the meeting started at 4 o'clock.